what the Bible really says about homosexuality. The Bible, Old Testament and New, has much to say about homosexual acts, such as sodomy. The Bible is clear that God has declared such acts to be sin. For instance, God calls the homosexual acts committed by the men of Sodom very grievous, Genesis 18:20. He also calls those perverse sexual acts filthy, wicked, ungodly, and unlawful, 2 Peter 2:6-8. In the book of Jude, verse 7, God explains that the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed for fornication with strange flesh. In this, God contrasts homosexual sex acts with sexual relations between one man and one woman in his created holy institution of marriage, where the two become one flesh, Genesis 2:24. God has forbidden and cursed all fornication, the joining of human beings as one flesh in a sexual union outside of marriage, 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 11. In 1 Corinthians 6:15-20, he condemns the sexual acts men commit with women prostitutes because the two become one flesh outside of marriage. Homosexual acts are especially evil in that they are fornication with strange flesh. Throughout the Holy Scriptures, the homosexual wickedness of Sodom is referred to and used as a sort of benchmark for evil. Of course, because of the Scriptures use the phrase to know when speaking of that famous incident when a crowd of Sodomites demand to have sex with two men visitors staying in Sodom. Some have tried to say that the Sodomites only wanted to get acquainted with those visitors, who are in reality angels. This is ridiculously poor biblical scholarship. The Hebrew verb yada, which translates to the English verb to know, is used in several scriptural contexts, including to denote sexual intercourse, as Genesis 4:1, and Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain. No, the Sodomites attempting to break down Lot's door did not simply want to shake hands with his visitors. This is foolish, as saying that Sodom was destroyed because its inhabitants did not care for the poor. That particular claim is found in a distortion of Ezekiel 16:48-50. In this biblical passage, God's people were being warned that they were acting worse than the people of Sodom had by the very fact that they were God's chosen people, and yet were committing abominable sins. The verse contained a short chronological account of how the citizens of Sodom, which were located in a well-watered area, became lazy and selfish in prosperity. Eventually, they also became haughty and committed abomination, a reference to sodomy and other homosexual acts. At that point, God judged and destroyed the town. Yes, the citizens of Sodom were selfish, and that was wrong. However, Sodom was clearly destroyed by God because it had become a sodomite culture. Still, some pro-homosexual champions claim the Bible does not condemn homosexual acts. Yet it does so from cover to cover. The Bible condemns homosexual acts in the strongest terms, and even by describing the acts themselves, such as in Leviticus 18:22, "Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind; it is an abomination." Leviticus 18:22 and Leviticus 20:13 both graphically forbid sexual acts between two men. Romans 1:26 forbids sexual acts between two women, labeling lesbianism unnatural, saying that women who do those things change the natural, for that is against nature. So much for the born that way argument. Romans 1:27 condemns sexual acts between men and men. Verse 27 begins with and likewise also the men. 1 Corinthians 6:9-11 is a warning against the deception that one can live in an open rebellion to God's law and still be a Christian headed for heaven. In that passage, sodomites are accurately and plainly called abusers of themselves with mankind. 1 Timothy 1:8-11 instructs on this lawful use of the law to punish persons who commit such acts as murder, perjury, and sodomy. Here, homosexuals are graphically described as them that defile themselves with mankind. Both of those descriptions phrases, like all New Testament references to those guilty of condemning sodomy, are faithfully translated from the word arsenakis, the Greek word which describes homosexual sex acts. Greek was the language in the New Testament was originally written. Of course, until recent times, no one attempted to claim that the Bible does not condemn and outlaw homosexual sex. That may be in part because one must play the part of a fool to do so. Romans 1:22. Consider for a moment a few more of the desperate excuses which have been concocted of late to justify sodomy and other homosexual acts. There are some who smugly overlook all the biblical condemnations and prohibitions of homosexual acts other than those occurring in the book of Leviticus, where those acts are called abomination. Then state, so what if God calls homosexual acts an abomination in the Bible? He also calls the eating of shellfish an abomination. Of course, these people may or may not realize that the ban on eating shellfish was part of the Mosaic dietary law, which was set aside by God when Jesus Christ instituted a new covenant through his shed blood. Luke 22:20. They also may be ignorant of the fact that the word rendered abomination in the Old Testament comes from 6 different closely related Hebrew words. When the Bible says that eating shellfish is an abomination under the Mosaic dietary rules, abomination in that case is rendered from the Hebrew word shikwitz, which means filthy. Under the Mosaic dietary laws, the Hebrews were to consider shellfish filthy, that is unclean food. On the other hand, the Hebrew word which describes homosexual acts is toba, finds complete expository Dictionary of Old and New Testament Words, 1984, accurately states toba, defining something or someone as essentially unique in the sense of being dangerous, sinister, and repulsive. The Bible tells us that God judged sodomy, toba, to be toba.